Hi, I'm Dan Hegstead. Welcome to my vlog and podcast, Next Steps, Tools for Transforming from Coping to Thriving. Today we're going to talk about goals, but hang in there. We're going to take a little different take on it. How important are goals? And, well, we'll get into it. Just want to remind you, here's the book that this is based on, Next Steps, Tools for Transforming from Coping to Thriving. It is available on Amazon as a paperback, obviously, but it's also a Kindle e-reader and an audiobook read by me. And if you're looking for a good speaker, I'm available. Well, if you can't find a good speaker, you might check me out too. All that information's on my website, danhegstead.com. So let's talk about goals a little bit. As a motivational speaker, you know, I have to threaten you with living in a van down by the river and the half glass of water, and you got to have goals. So I do believe that goals are extremely important. But I ran across this quote from Alan Watts, and I posted it on Facebook because I thought it might stir some discussion. I read it and I thought, I don't know if I agree with that, but it was thought-provoking, so I've been thinking about it. It's been a couple weeks, and there have been some good thoughts on my Facebook page. So I've been thinking about it, and so let's talk about that. Here's the quote, Alan Watts. He's an interesting guy, by the way. Check out Alan Watts. Paradoxical as it may seem, said Alan, the purposeful life has no content, no point. It hurries on and misses everything. Not hurrying, the purposeless life misses nothing, for it is only when there is no goal and no rush that the human senses are fully open to receive the world. Wow. So I don't immediately agree with that, but I'm open-minded. I like new ideas. Let's think about it. So I am extremely goal-oriented. That's just the way I work. I want the goal. I'm not into the process. It's like, what do we want to accomplish? What do we need to do that? Let's get there as fast as we can. And I understand we need the process people. You need to go through all the parts, and hopefully they learn that they need people like me to drive them toward the goal. But it sometimes works against you. And I'll talk about that in a minute too. I think it's important to have goals, and I'll never change that, because we need to think about, what do you want out of your life? If you don't know what you want, you're just going to wander around aimlessly and take whatever comes along, and I don't think that's a good thing. And if you're not motivated by what you want, a goal, you will be motivated by what you don't want, which is negative stimuli. And if you're not happy here, you move there. And if that's not happy, you move there. And so you're moving all over the place, burning a lot of energy, but getting nowhere. If you have a goal, on the other hand, you're going that way, and you will not be dissuaded from it. And it's just so much more positive. You're going towards something rather than away from everything. So I will never change that. It's always important to have goals. The downside of that is, as a very goal-oriented person, since I was a little kid, I wanted to be a radio announcer. And that's just all I wanted to do. And I think people probably told me, you know, there was some downside to it. I remember doing the career assessment thing, and, you know, there's a downside to radio and, you know, and so forth. But no, that's what I wanted to do, and that's the way it was. I volunteered at a college radio station when I was a junior in high school, and, 10 watts FM. I was the top of the world. Got a job at our local commercial radio station. There was only one at the time, and I was it was a great time. I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. I was going to college for radio. Well, you don't need a college degree to be a disc jockey. I don't think you need a 2-year degree. Whatever. Anyway, I moved to the town where I am now to take a job in radio, and there's where reality really hit me. I mean, the pay was just awful. Some of the people I met, There's some great people in radio too, but I met a lot of people whose ego to intellect ratio was way out of whack. And it turns out it just wasn't for me. Well, I mean, I like to pay rent and buy groceries, and that was just not possible. So I left radio, and then what do? This is all you've ever wanted to do, and suddenly you come to reality and you find out this is not it. I find the work very boring. It's very repetitive. Sitting in one room for hours at a time, here's the weather. Here's the weather. I tried to add some spice to it, but nobody appreciated it. So I left. I worked in a hospital for a couple of years. That was great. Great education, and I made triple the money. And then I got into sales and fundraising, working with public television the last 24 years, and that was terrific. I did well. And if I could go back, I would see that, no, I didn't really want radio, but while I love to work with words and ideas and sound and pictures and so forth, well, that's what I'm doing now. And in my video work and making these vlogs and podcasts for you. So I do voiceover work too, which is get to use the voice and get to make this. Okay, so totally focused and finding out, no, that's not what I want. It's not my thing. So what do? You change course. So being totally focused on a goal is can work against you too. So I think when Watts says purposeful life has no content, no point, I don't hear that as purposeful life. I see it as a totally goal-oriented life. I think he's thinking of the hard-driving, charging Type A's who just are going to feel awful if they don't make this month's sales quota and that sort of thing. I think you need to be flexible with that. So I don't see it as purposeful. I think it is goal-driven. I think we need to find some balance there is what I'm seeing. I think the purpose of life is to enjoy life and to be of service and to learn and grow as a human being. And as difficult as that may be, you just do the best you can. That's the purposeful life. And I think people hear Watts saying this as the purposeful life has no content. I think they're kind of missing the point there. But it's thought-provoking. I'm glad we thought of that. This discussion reminded me of something I read of Henry David Thoreau from Walden. He said, I sat in my sunny doorway from sunrise until noon, wrapped in reverie, amidst the pines and the hickories and sumacs, in undisturbed solitude and stillness, while the birds sang around or flitted noiseless through the house, until by the sun falling in at my west window, or the noise of some traveler's wagon on the distant highway, I was reminded of the lapse of time. I grew in those seasons like corn in the night, and they were far better than any work of hands would have been. They were not time subtracted from my life, but so much over and above my usual allowance. Now, the folks who are totally focused on goals are going, he was just sitting there and enjoying it. We need to do more of that. We need to do that. It's good to have goals, but you need to relax. And, think of him sitting for hours. That's happened to me at times. And I think it's a good and healthy thing to do. By the way, I visited Walden, 30 years ago. He talks about the noise of some traveler's wagon on the distant highway. Well, Walden is right near I-95 and the Walden Sanitary Landfill, and it was certainly not a quiet place, but it was fun to go there. So I've been thinking about this because in the last week, my wife and I took a road trip out to the Black Hills of South Dakota. We live in Minnesota, and you have to drive across South Dakota to get there. And then we went up to Medora, North Dakota. If you haven't been there, check that out. It's really really nice, and drive across North Dakota to get back home. And several years ago, a friend of mine he did a supported bicycle trip across the country from west to east, and sounds like a pretty terrific experience. But one of the things he said, it's nice that you can eat as much as you want and not get fat. But one of the other things he said was, South Dakota is way bigger than it needs to be. And out of all the experiences he had over that time biking across the country, South Dakota is way bigger than it needs to be. And that, I think is true. But here's kind of what's going on. Another friend of mine, Rollin, would drive with his dad from here in Minnesota down to Arizona every fall. Dad would stay there and Rollin would drive back. And then in the spring, he'd go back, pick him up, and come back. They'd take a different road as much as they could every time, stay off the interstates. And doesn't that sound terrific? What wonderful times they must have had. But Rollin says one time he was complaining about North Dakota and how boring it is. And his dad's kind of snapped at him, as I recall Rollin telling the story, saying, that's because you're not paying attention. That's because you are not paying attention. It's true that if your goal is to get to the Black Hills, or if your goal is to get back home, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, the Great Plains are going to seem huge and boring. But what's your goal? Are you paying attention? As boring as North and South Dakota may seem, if you pay attention, every mile is different from every other mile, if you pay attention. And if you get into the spirit of the travel and enjoying the sights, you have to pay attention. And that's why I like driving across the Dakotas. I wouldn't mind if they were smaller, but I like driving. And because there's so much to see, the clouds are always changing, and as similar as the landscape can be, it does change. You're not paying attention. There it is. That's the difference, I think, that Watts is talking about. The purposeful life has no content. If your goal is to get home, North Dakota is massive. If your goal is to enjoy the journey, then you don't miss anything. And, this is stuff that's easy to say and not easy to do, but I hope the next time you're driving across the Great Plains, or if you got a long plane trip to wherever, think of that. Make the journey something that is interesting, and you have to do that with intention. You do that with intention. You don't just let it happen. The other thing I wanted to mention is people talk about a bucket list. I've got things I want to do, but I hesitate to call it a bucket list. I do so people know what I'm talking about. But to me, a bucket list says that here are these 50 things I want to do or places I want to visit. And the inference is that if you don't make the list, you have failed somehow. That's kind of the way I hear it. So I've got way more places to visit and see and experience than I could ever do in my lifetime. And if I do, I haven't had a list that's long enough. But it's not a bucket list. It's what I want to do, but I'm not going to have failed if I don't make them all. And I have them ranked as best I can, and we'll just see how that turns out. They're goals, but it's not like I have to do it. It's interesting. I've been to Montreal 4 times and never once wanted to go there. I was with other people who were going there, or we were on our way somewhere else or whatever. Montreal is a terrific city, and you should visit. It's just beautiful. And the extinct volcano in the middle of town, Mount Royal, in the night is just one of the most fabulous city views you'll ever see. So go visit Montreal. Go visit Quebec, too. Go visit everywhere. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on goals and the balance of, stopping to smell the roses and don't get too caught up in stuff and enjoy the experience or you're going to waste your time. That's what I think. I'm Dan Hegstead. This is my vlog and podcast, Next Steps, Tools for Transforming from Coping to Thriving. You can buy the book. The link to Amazon is on my website, or if you're looking for a great speaker, that's on my website too. Thank you ever so much for watching or listening. Next Steps, Tools for Transforming from Coping to Thriving.